Hey, everybody. Welcome to another show, Think, Engage, Thrive, where we talk about all things entrepreneurship. We try and bring you the best and the brightest of entrepreneurs and the unusual to give you a really good understanding of what it takes to be an entrepreneur and what it takes to be successful. And tonight we have Valerie Trapunsky, and she's a former personal assistant for A-list people. She's been a chief of staff, and she's currently the founder and CEO of ChatterBoss, which is the first and only remote executive assistant service of its kind. She's also the author of Delegation Nation, which is a book which we'll talk about in a little while and where you can get that. And that's really on how entrepreneurs and assistants can really work together in a remote world to elevate what they're doing. So we're going to bring Valerie in, and we're going to talk about what she's done, how she got there, and a little bit about her business and some of the obstacles and some of the things she's seen. And I think it'll be a really fun episode. So let's bring her in and let's get to know her. Hi.
Hi, Phil. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. So sounds like you've done a lot in this world of assistant, executive assistant, remote assistant, and obviously it led you down the path to build ChatterBoss. So, but give us a little bit of a background, a little bit of a history about yourself before we get to ChatterBoss, and let's just get an understanding of sort of what motivated you, what got you here, and how your whole entrepreneurial mind works.
Isn't it wonderful that we can tell our stories in hindsight, right? Like we could kind of like rearrange all things and say, like, this is how it perfectly fit together. So I love it.
Julie Masiello.
Oh, geez. I'm sorry.
So I started my career in advertising. I actually thought that I would be in, the CEO of an advertising agency one day, but there were other plans in store for me. So I got an opportunity to work as a personal assistant and a chief of staff. Specifically, I got into that role because I was in my early 20s. There was promise of lots of travel, and I was like, okay, I can hold, I can hold my advertising dreams for a while and do this and travel the world. And I really just fell into this career, and I supported a number of different principles over the years. And it's, like the stakes just kept getting higher and higher, the kind of people that I was supporting, because my experience was becoming so niche. And it was fascinating because up until the moment that I became an assistant, if you had asked me, I believed that the assistant role is monogamous. I thought you have one assistant and one CEO or founder or whatever, and then you work together one-on-one. But it was not the case with these high net worth individuals, people that are the highest types of performers in their fields. I was often the second, third, fourth assistant on the team. And at first, I didn't understand it. I didn't like it. But then I learned that I can work along the side of other people's strengths. It minimizes my weaknesses, and we can really go further together. And that's where, after a certain amount of years of doing that kind of work, and it's hard work, all work, I think, is hard work. But what was hard in that, what was very hard in being in that role for the kind of people that I was supporting was that you essentially don't have a life of your own. You live the life of others. And so as I was, getting a little bit older, wanted to settle into my own life, I started ChatterBoss, and it was on the principles that I had learned in being on the ground in that position.
Yeah. I I have to ask. I have to ask because I've seen the position advertised a lot, and I know in Europe it's a different type of position. But what does the chief of staff do? Right. I mean, government. We know what a chief of staff does, but in business, what does the chief of staff do?
So a chief of staff is the right hand to the executive, to the founder, to the CEO. And the chief of staff function is to essentially duplicate the efforts of the founder, of the principal, in order for them to make more time. So at its highest level, your chief of staff is able to run the day-to-day operations on behalf of the principal, so that they have more time. And so it will look a lot like team management. It will look a lot like hiring. It will look very often like duplicating some of the strengths of the founder. So if, for example, you are looking for a chief of staff, you may look for somebody with strong e-commerce and marketing, because you're wanting to split your abilities further.
Right.
You want a second brain, but at the same time, someone who has some complementary skill sets that just keeps the train running organizationally.
So it's almost like a chief operating officer.
Yes, the differences between a chief operating officer and a chief of staff is that a chief of staff will be more guiding and in support of the CEO or the founder in this like particular like uplifting way. So, for example, as a chief of staff, and if you are my founder, it is important to me that your schedule and calendaring works. It's not that I'm doing it. I'm probably managing an executive assistant under me to do it, but it's also to ensure like the well-being of you as the founder, which is the chief operating officer, right? Is going to focus more on the numbers, more on the actions,
Right.
the operations from a business sense, where a chief of staff is also going to have a deeper kind of connection to you as the founder.
Ah, I got it. I think I might have to get one at some point.
Yeah.
So, so you were in all these roles and you watched how these assistants, like you said before, you were one of many assistants and you didn't realize at the time that you thought you were the low person on the totem pole, but you didn't realize that everybody working together was sort of moving it forward. Was that sort of the impetus for ChatterBoss? Is that what got you started and got you started thinking about it?
Absolutely. I saw that this multiple assistant model worked. I I didn't know how powerful of a position a executive assistant, a personal assistant is. I thought that it was, remember, I wanted to be the CEO of an advertising agency when I, had the opportunity for a personal assistant. I'm like, I went to university in the United States to be a personal assistant, right? Like that's how I imagined
Yeah.
that's how I thought of it. I didn't realize what a powerful, interesting, challenging role it is. And seeing how I was being leveraged in the business, and then later on how multiple assistants were leveraged, I realized, there are people that expect that, right? If
Right.
you have, if you reached a certain kind of level of success, you expect that. You see others around you have that, and I looked inside of like businesses, small businesses. I saw that there's a huge gap. People didn't expect this kind of level of service. They didn't expect this kind of leverage. They didn't imagine that they could have it. So that's where I started ChatterBoss. One, I was inspired to have a two assistant model. So all of our clients have not one, but two assistants. But number two, there's a big educational component. And that's where the book, comes in as well. We want to teach our entrepreneurs and the business owners that we serve how to best leverage. So there's been a lot of that infused into who we are, into our brand, and the way that we function.
So you mentioned the book Delegation Nation: How Entrepreneurs and Assistants Can Thrive Together in a Remote World. So what are you really saying in the book is that if you're a founder, if you're managing a company, you're running a company, you should really have a multi assistant model, or
The focus of this book is to merge the perspective of the entrepreneur and the assistant. And it's a very big focus. There's a lot of tactical components. So you have scorecards in there, you have charts. I mean, it takes you from start to finish, essentially the process that ChatterBoss does on behalf of our clients. And so it tells you the different watch outs, the different ways that you can optimize the relationship with your assistant, and as an assistant, the ways that you can optimize the relationship with the entrepreneur, the business owner that you are supporting. But a very big goal of the book is focused on communication. How do you avoid miscommunication? And the reason I write from this perspective is because I believe that the executive assistant function is one of the most challenging in terms of communication. It does not have a set of templates. So if you're working with a bookkeeper, there's going to be a limitation, right? 40, 50 things that somebody can do for you. As an EA, it so depends on your personality, the personality of the person that you're supporting, their business, their processes, and there's a million ways to have a disconnect. And so how I approach the virtual executive assistant function is to first set up the ground foundation of good communication between the assistant and the client, and then building on top of like the projects and the tasks. But for me, the relationship and communication is number one, and that's a very big focus of the book. How do you have a good relationship?
Yeah. Well, I think communication in business always a challenge, and I think sometimes um, in startups and when the business is young and you've got entrepreneurs that are pushing ahead, they may think they're communicating, but they're not communicating, and they're not communicating very well. And I'll be honest, I actually had this conversation with myself yesterday because I have somebody who runs my division for doing social media, and I had sent a message through Teams to them, said, we should do such and such. And I laid out what I thought was pretty clear. And then they came back and asked me a question, and I'm looking and going, I thought I answered this. Maybe I wasn't clear. So I retyped it again, but in a different way. And then they did what I asked them to do, but it wasn't what I asked for. And they're very good at if I have if I talk to them one on one, but I was on call, so I was just doing it. And it came back and it wasn't right. And I'm thinking, well, it's obviously not them, because if I got on a call and told them, they would know what I'm talking about. So I was forced to go back and read what I wrote, and I could see that it made sense to me.
Yep.
It didn't make sense to anybody else.
Yep.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I could see how, and I've had positions in my past where I've had EAs and I've had, a staff around me, and I could see where they could take that and interpret it and give it to somebody and give a clear direction versus what I just did, which was wrong. Now, some people I think would fly off the handle and say, you didn't listen to me, you didn't this, but I knew that it was me and not them, just because of our past history. So.
Yeah, and probably your past history, but also that you've been delegating for so long. And so, I always, like, when I host like webinars and conversations, always I ask, where do you see yourself as when it comes to delegation from 1 to 10? And when you are just starting delegating, you're closer to those beginning numbers. Actually, we have if you go on the website, the first thing that pops up is a delegation self-assessment. So
Yeah.
you can come in and you can see how you score amongst other entrepreneurs. And so, that's interesting to know. But if you are somebody that has done delegation for a while, then you start to learn these lessons. And that's where, again, I look in Delegation Nation. It is for people that have, like, where your relationships have failed with people that you've been delegating to. But it's also if you're just someone that's getting started and you want to get started on the right foot, because no one's going to do it perfectly. And just because we have experience delegating also doesn't mean that we're going to be great at it all the time. We're moody, we're hungry. There's a power dynamic in the direction of the entrepreneur. So when you're in a bad mood, right,
Which never happened.
you are more likely to not have control. And so, yeah, it's very self-aware of you and very enlightened of you.
Yeah, well, I've taken enough personality tests in my lifetime to know exactly who I am and to understand who I am. And I've learned to, before I, let's say, get frustrated that I'm not being heard, or I always take a step back and think, well, has this happened a lot, or is it just, one time? But I also, whether I'm at the office or whether I'm working from home, I always have my dogs with me. And I have one dog who doesn't like it when I raise my voice.
Oh,
And even if I'm raising my voice in fun, she doesn't distinguish it and she'll jump on me. And that's
oh,
sort of a signal to me that I got to bring it down a notch. So I think it's funny that she doesn't like it when I raise my voice at all.
oh
It's
my
really
gosh.
funny.
We all need a pet like this. That's great.
It is cute. So, have you? Let's go back to your, before all this. You were in university, and um, did you always have the drive to be an entrepreneur? Or is that something that sort of evolved over time? Like some people, when I can remember when I was, young. I mean, I started my first business when I was 27, but I I I went a different way for a while, and I thought this is a better route for me, But then I got the bug again, and it didn't last, and I've been an entrepreneur ever since. But I always wonder about that. Is that something that evolved, or is that something that when thought about it when you were young?
Things. I think one, it is something that I can see threads of from when I was young. Specifically, I always wanted to sell something. Like it really didn't matter what. Like I would, fantasize that I have like a sticker business, and it didn't matter that I didn't know how to make stickers. I really was, thinking I'm like, okay, I'm going to go door to door, and I'm going to sell these stickers. But I'm like, these stickers aren't very good. So I always had that, and coming up with ideas. And so I believe that many of us who have chosen to start our own business have that drive somewhere, and that kind of a brain makeup. And I think that the other sign of it is that I didn't feel very employable when I was in any given role. I I had a hard time taking direction from people. I just felt, I felt, I just felt all kinds of things. And maybe as I progressed in my career, maybe eventually I would have gotten to a place that felt comfortable. But I always had a problem, I guess, with authority. And so that was the other thing. Like, I don't think that I had any other choice. So right now, if I imagine, as an entrepreneur, there's ups and downs in your business, and we're all driven by different things. I am very driven, to succeed, to be the best, but I'm also equally driven never to work for anyone because I can't imagine it. I cannot imagine it after getting a taste of freedom. So
I think that's great. I had a problem with authority. I understand exactly what you're talking about because I I have trouble, and I've had to go and work for other companies. I owned a business, and that got bought by a larger company, and I had to do a 2 year workout, and I wound up working for them for 2 years, and I went from agile, rapid change, making decisions, group efforts, and things like that to this meeting on Monday morning and meeting on Tuesday and meeting on Wednesday and meetings to have meetings. And it drove me insane. And I used to voice my opinion like, do we really need this meeting? I don't understand the purpose of this meeting. Can we do a stand up and just get it over with? We spent 2 hours talking about nothing. And it doesn't work for me. And people say, well, you have a problem with authority. I said, I don't think it's a problem with authority as much as I have a problem with stupidity and wasting time, and you're not doing anything to move the business forward. You're making yourself feel good. And I do think that that's true. I think people look at it and say, well, you have a problem with authority, but really it's not. It's a problem with, structure and function of something that's not, doesn't seem to be working. Right.
It's
That's how
it's
I see it.
funny. It's so funny that you say that, right? Because we can run businesses in a bunch of different ways. Like there's not one way, but what I'm
Yeah.
hearing from you and like what I really relate to is like I want to do it my way, right? Like that may I can't tell it. Maybe like that's a good meeting that that person had, right? Like they had a plan. I am positive that my team thinks that some meetings that I hold just really don't make sense, but it works for me. I think it's the most efficient, right? No, of course, I always get buy-in. It's one of our core values. But I think a lot of it is that I just want to do it the way that I want to do it. And if it no longer works, I want to be the one to change it. So maybe you have a problem with authority too.
Yeah. I do. I have a problem with wasting my time. I do have
Oh.
that. I have a problem with just I think that I only have so many hours in a day to think and get things done. And I don't have a problem with meetings. We have meetings. We have other people calling meetings. And as long as you have an agenda and we're moving forward and it's valuable information. But if you bring me into a meeting and I'm sitting there and I'm questioning what we're talking about, I I you know, I can't deal with it. I don't know if that's. I don't think I have a problem with authority. In all of the personality tests I've ever done, it doesn't say that I have a problem with authority. It does say that I am a heavy driver. I can drive. I will push. If I get something in my head, I will push through every single obstacle to get through the other side. But I do have the flexibility to understand when I'm pushing too much and it's not working, and I have to pivot and go a different way. But I do. I am an extreme driver. Extreme.
Well, it's also interesting. Now I want to personality assess you because as part of ChatterBoss, one thing that we do, we lean very heavily on psychometrics and personality assessments, and that's also been something so fun to explore, to understand entrepreneurs, the way that they're driven, the way that assistants are driven, and I'm always so grateful for all the assistants, all of the clients that have essentially let us experiment with them, because like the people that have been on my team for 5 years have taken like 4 different assessments and like other like add-on things, and like we're just always just really learning. But from what you're sharing, it's so good, because and like that's what we want for the entrepreneurs that we support. When you learn more about what are your natural reactions to certain things, you really have an opportunity to take more control versus thinking that like something is coming from the external environment. So we have, every client gets a relationship manager that's like a delegation coach, and they're primarily like they are trained in the psychometrics that we use, and that like our clients really walk away like from a school of not just knowing how to delegate to their assistants, but to know how to communicate better with others outside of the world of delegation. So I love that you're so into personality and psychometrics.
Oh yeah. The, when you get a chance, just not to get off the subject, but there's a woman, very smart woman named Sally Hogshead. Maybe you heard of her, maybe you didn't. But she
Mhm.
started out as a marketer. But she, like you, started to get fascinated by the metrics of the mind and personalities and things like that. And when you get a chance, just look her up. And she's got a book, but she also has some things on her website where she does these personality tests, and
Mhm.
she has her own sort of style of doing them. And we used her in a couple of businesses that we had to help us think through, sort of the brand and things like that, but which she's great at. But just her, what she sort of transitioned into now is more of this person who studies people of influence and
Mhm.
that sort of personality.
Mhm.
And she has some really good stuff. So when you get a chance, but you remind me a lot of her, because I think I see, if you were to ask me where do you see me and where do I see you in a couple of years, I think
Mhm.
you're going to wind up expanding on your business and doing more in this whole study
Mhm.
of personality of this type of thing. But
Yeah,
anyway,
it's very interesting. It's one of my kind of like big passions, and yeah, connect us also. If you are connected to us both, yeah, that's a very interesting connection.
yeah, she's a great person, but
Mhm.
brilliant, just absolutely brilliant. But so yeah, because the reason I asked you about your past, and if you had it, we talked to a lot of startups, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of guys that may build successful business, a lot of people have built successful businesses, and they sort of always go back. I sold, worms when I was 5 years old. There was a stream and people used to fish, and I used to sell them worms, or and they always start out with these stories of sales. Just like you said, I always thought of myself selling something, which I always find fascinating because I didn't ever think about selling something.
Uh-huh.
I always thought about, well, I'm going to take this person, and I think I can get them to do this for me.
Mm-hmm.
A little
Yeah.
different, but you know,
Oh, I love that. Yeah, we it's interesting, right? Like whichever it's how I believe that it's probably like the way that we're wired, and then like whatever is our like strongest competency. So probably like with me, sales is strong, and then it's the same, right? Like finance zero, right? Like there's just like certain areas completely, and that's the other thing that like when we work with entrepreneurs, some of them feel like how can I be the CEO of a company and really lead if I have gaps or like weaknesses in certain areas of competence? For example, finance, right? Like that's shocking. How can you lead a business with very little like skills in finance? That's important. But I think that when we are free to be ourselves, like, so I know my extreme strengths and I also know my extreme weaknesses, and so I can disarm myself and say, look, I have no idea, right? Like anyone in the room is probably going to make a better decision here as me than me. So I always, brought in, and that's where our entrepreneurs, they can come in and fill the gaps with our EAs in the areas that they're not strong, to support in those parts of the business. And also in the very beginning stages, it was very important for me to bring in mentors and advisors like that would fill the gaps. So I think that's also so important for us, just to have like a full well-rounded team, and then also to know like where are the areas that we could just let go of.
yeah, yeah. I think that that's important. I'm not a good. I'm okay at sales, and I'm not a good detail person, and I know that. So I have to surround myself with details because to me, it's like, okay, I have this idea, so let's go and do it. And everybody's like, okay, we can do it, but we have to do it like this. I go, well, can't we just try it? Let's do it and see what happens. And they're like, no, no, no. So I need people around me that can slow me down or stop me or refine me, so to speak, right? But I'm not very good at sales. But the one thing I learned, I used to listen to all this stuff about, well, you want to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, but I never bought into that because I think what I've learned is because you can have people that are smarter than you around you, but if they don't share the vision, if they
Mm,
don't see where
yeah.
you need to get to, then it becomes conflict. So I'm all for sharing. I say you surround yourself with people who share the same vision and want to get to the same place or see where you want to get to, right? Because that'll help you get there faster. But I do agree with you. There are, you need to have people that'll pick up those weaknesses, whether it's finance, whether it's human resources, whatever it is, whether it's detail. Because I could never be an artist. I would never be a good artist because I'm not good at detail.
Well, you're a true visionary, and I think entrepreneurs, a lot of the time, they are visionaries. So if you know Gino Wickman and Rocket Fuel, he talks about the integrator and the visionary, and that's exactly it. If it, as an entrepreneur, like those tendency, right, to see the big picture and whatever is the competency, and to kind of experiment and to take risks and all of that. If that's all with the visionary, then what's with the integrator is to say, okay, you have 100 ideas, and I'm going to listen to all of them, and one of them is going to really stick. And so, helping the visionary actually get their vision accomplished, and it's such an important mix. And so,
Oh,
like in the book, I love the way that he writes Rocket Fuel and the way that he defines those two functions as needing one another. And it was a book model that I really incorporated when I was writing Delegation Nation, because it is from both sides. It's the
yeah.
entrepreneur assistant, and very often one is visionary, one is integrator.
Yeah, yeah, there's no question about that. You need to have somebody who can help you execute.
Yeah.
one person has ideas and one person has to go out and execute it. But and they do have to work together. And
Yes.
hopefully, again, if they have that shared vision of where everybody's heading, it works really well. But I've seen some startups throughout my life where those two sort
Uh-huh.
of butt heads, which doesn't, you know, I I know that people say, well, conflict is good because conflict brings resolution.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you need to have that conflict so you can talk through things. But I think there's a big difference between conflict and two people who just don't get along, and they're going to have conflict over everything. And I've seen that happen, and I've seen that happen with startups when they're young. Eventually somebody winds up leaving. I think the big one was, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. They had two different roles, and one was the visionary, one was the executor. But it got to the point where you know Steve Wozniak just didn't like the style of Steve Jobs and how he was, demeaning people and things like that, being a bully. And so I think it can work, and I think sometimes it blows up. But
Mhm. We also say that we want, like, when we're looking on entrepreneurs and assistants, but if like any relationship within a business, especially if they're partners, you want to come in eyes wide open into what you're
yeah,
getting.
yeah,
And I think that the biggest reason that, like, all of this happens is because I expect something from you and I want you to do it my way, and you expect something from me, and we have a disconnect, or we're very different. And so that's, again, kind of going back to the psychometrics, because what we do is we look at the assistant, we look at the entrepreneur, we pair them based on their similarities and their differences. And a lot of the times there are more differences than there are similarities. But when we have an opportunity to talk about them and say, when you do this person, this is how it will land. And are you okay? Because when we have differences, we do have friction. So it's either friction that you choose, that you have decided it's worth it because it's for the better of the business and I will respect those differences,
yeah,
or you say, I don't want that friction, and you work with people that are very similar as you, and you kind of you go a little bit slower, you don't go as far, and maybe that's also a success for you. So you just have to know, like, what are your objectives. And one of my other advisors gave me, when I was just getting started, gave me the book, The Partnership Charter.
yeah,
I don't know if you've heard of that, but it really, if you're looking into, like, partners, and, like, that also inspired me, like, how do assistants work as partners for entrepreneurs? But it talks down to the nitty gritty what you should discuss with other people before you get on board. And that's always been my approach with, just relationships, like business relationships, work relationships, and how we do pairings.
yeah. That's excellent. So if somebody wants to use ChatterBoss, they essentially walk us through that. They go to the website, they fill out an assessment. Just walk us through the process so people can get an understanding. And if any of the entrepreneurs out there want to use the system, just go through it a little bit.
Our first step is always to have a strategy conversation. And so that looks like, if you're on the website, if you go to schedule a consultation, it takes 1 minute, find a time that works for you, you get on a call. In that conversation, it's really a strategy session around you, your business, your needs, and how an assistance team can start to support some of your objectives. So we start from that level of strategy. Now, once an entrepreneur, has decided, okay, I'm ready to kick things off, and I'm ready to commit a budget, my time, like, commitment to having an assistant, then what our process looks like is we try to take as much homework as possible off of the plate of the entrepreneur. So what that means is that you don't have to have it be all perfect.
Right.
You don't have to come with your SOPs and all of your, outlined how you're going to work with an assistant and a plan, but you do have to come with a desire and a commitment to work with an assistant.
Yeah.
From there, we will create a roadmap for you. So you just have to fill out a questionnaire. We will we will make a roadmap for you. It's a tangible document, and we will guide you on what are the first few projects and tasks to hand off. And then from there, you pair to your assistant. And as I mentioned, part of your onboarding, a character assessment is included. So if you choose to take it, we will also tell you how we paired you with your assistant, what you can expect, and give you pointers there as well. And then you remain having access to your dedicated relationship manager. So the assistants have the same relationship manager as you, and you guys work together, to make sure that you are reaching your delegation success on both sides.
So, and is it an hourly? How does it how does it work from that respect? So let's say that I need an assistant, but I don't need it full time. I only need 10 hours a week, or I mean,
Yeah. That's exactly it. And it's what makes ChatterBoss unique and different from other companies out there. The way that we work is that we first establish and understand what is your budget and what are your needs. And then we pair you to an assistant that is the right match in terms of like the appetite for the work and all of that. And so we don't believe in locking you into kind of budgets and hours that you don't need. We want you to know this is what you are looking for. So we will first do an analysis of your tasks. We will identify what is your budget, and then you can work alongside your assistant for whatever works inside of your budget. So, some people use 5 hours a week, some use 10, some use 15, but we make a customized plan for you. And we go from there because we believe, you as the entrepreneur are always changing, your business needs are always changing. So we want to create a model where you have the opportunity to be supported in the way that you need to be supported at the time that you are, getting that help.
so it's flexible. It's
Yes.
very flexible.
Yes.
That's great. No, it's true.
You're like, long story long.
No. It was great, but essentially, it's flexible to
Yes.
what people need, because there are some weeks where I think to myself, oh, I really need help this week. I need like somebody to do everything for me, and then there are some weeks where I only need a couple of hours, and so that's um, yeah, I think that I'm not unique in that situation. I think there are some weeks where, people just get overloaded, especially, again, we're in e-commerce. It's the fourth quarter right now. Things just there's not enough hours in the day to deal with what we have to deal with. And so, but then January comes and it sort of, dies off for a little while. So, um, yeah. So so when you started this, obviously you started it from scratch. You didn't buy a company that existed. You started it from scratch. So what are some of the obstacles that you've hit along the way? Because everybody's got obstacles. Every business has an inflection point, a pivot, whatever you want to call it. So walk us through how that,
Which obstacles from which year? Which season of obstacles? For me, the most challenging was the getting started part. Now, every part of business, every year I find like a completely new challenge that, I feel is, where every year I find something that I'm like, oh, this is the lesson that I'm not going to be able to learn, right? Like, this is it. Like, I thought that I mastered it, but the hardest of it all was just launching and getting off the ground, because every challenge that comes up, 2023 was a challenge. We saw entrepreneurs and business owners. This was a challenging year. I mean, we saw so many amazing businesses go out of business. We saw so many amazing businesses lose funding. It's what it is, right? And and of course, as a company, we're affected as well. And we're supporting these communities, and so with all of that, even like challenging years like this one has been, I think it's easier because you are already established. Like, you have other people that are there. You can go on autopilot in certain areas, right? I know kind of where to go, where to seek help when when problems arise. But in the first months and year where you are, especially if you don't have a co-founder, you're alone. Nobody believes really in your, like, they say that they believe it, right? But they're like, let's watch what happens. Like,
Oh, yeah.
what's the statistic? 90% of small businesses fail, right? So it's not real. And you spend that entire, I think, first year trying to convince everyone that it's real. So not only is like our like external circumstances against you when you're getting started, sometimes it's also this like internal, you start to question yourself when the business is already established, and you have teams and you have everything set up. Then you're like, whoa, I can't fail, because I'm not only failing myself, there's all these other people, and that kind of like pulls this like special energy out of you. But in the first like months and year, it's like the drive to just like shut down and be like, it's too hard, is so strong. And you don't like, if you're not an integrator, it's extra strong. If you're just if you're a person who's a visionary who has a hard time completing things, like, double good on you, the fact that like you have a business and it's like it made it past its first year, because it's really hard.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot. Um, and that first initial, um, well, I've always had this. I don't get afraid very easily. I'm not a person who gets. I'm only afraid of the ocean. That's what I'm
Mhm.
afraid of, and heights. Those are the only two things I'm really afraid of. But we talked about this on a lot of different shows with people. It always comes up that entrepreneurs or startups, the people who make it are the people who um, don't get turned off by that first initial, like, we hit a wall, it's getting too hard, right? Some of those people just retreat. They say, that's it, it's not for me. They should close up shop and they go and get a job. And then the other ones who say, I'm going to figure this out, maybe I'll have to pivot. And I use this example a lot. There are two young guys that I worked with a couple of years ago. I was helping them out as a mentor, and they had an app. And I've never, in all the entrepreneurs I mentor and everybody I mentor, I never tell them that they have a bad idea. Never. I just sort of point out what the metrics they should look at, or the statistics they should look at, or different things. And they were building this app, and it was not good because other people had tried to do it. It had to do with the geolocation and dealing with bars and restaurants and getting offers to your phone, no matter where you are. Problem with that is the bars and restaurants are all independent. They don't take the time to put in their information. So it just never works. People have tried it. But these guys did. I mean, these guys worked their tail off. They were driving Ubers at night to supplement their income. I mean, these dedicated dudes. These guys hit so many walls and they weren't going to turn around. But one day, they called me up and asked me if I could come and meet with them. And I said, yeah. And they were at an incubator in town. And I went to meet with them, and they just had the glummest looks. And they were like, I don't think that this business is going to make it. And I was like, look, I know, I'm sorry, but I don't think it is either. But
Mhm.
don't give up. Think about what you can do with what you have. And they said, yeah, we already have. We were up all night, and we've learned so much about apps and so much about the metrics and building apps and this and that. So we're going to go into the business where we help people build apps, which is what they did. And that's what they're still doing. It's 5, 6 years later. And, to me, those guys, I always said those guys are never going to fail because they're always going to see another path from what they have, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that I think that's what makes a good entrepreneur is that you know when to pivot or you know when to change. You're 100% right. There's always going to be obstacles every single day, right? I mean, the biggest one for us was COVID. We still haven't recovered from what we had prior to COVID, but we just had to change. We became a different type of company. But
It's always different. And during COVID, I was having a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs, and I think that the entrepreneurs like that are like in their soul entrepreneurs, that it was like a scary time. Like, of course, like some businesses moved forward, really leaped. Some, took many steps back in that time. But what I heard a lot at that time was that people were like, scared or worried or concerned, but they were also excited. Like, this is the moment that, like, entrepreneurs really shine with their personality traits, right? They're like, this is unknown. This is a playing field that no one has played on before.
yeah,
I can, it's like, like a new platform, right? Like
Yeah,
I could be
yeah,
first, and I could either,
yeah.
like the possibilities are endless. So yeah.
We had a little bit of that, but for the most part, we it was terrible for us
Mhm.
because we had a lot of brands that just didn't make it, and the
Yeah.
established brands. I was one recent, right. So I don't know if you follow like the news, but Smile Club, which was a alternative to orthodontia, right? It was the plastic. Ones that you get a series of them and you keep changing them. But I mean, these guys were out there since 2016 or 2017. They raised buku money, 35, 40 million, I think, got a huge valuation, and they're just shutting down. They're shutting down as of last week, shutting down. And so, you think to yourself, after 7 years, 8 years, what the heck, and it was really because they just they were never profitable and they couldn't find funding.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, how could you just be finding this out? I mean, obviously somebody wasn't paying attention, because if you're not profitable and you constantly have to raise money, you have to fix the fundamental business, right? To figure out why you're not profitable. You just can't ride along continually raising money. That never works. So
Well, it works sometimes. There's a clip you're talking, right? And there's a clip like a young Jeff Bezos, and he's being interviewed, and he's like, "So you're not profitable?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, and the interviewer is like, "Well, that's just bad business sense." So he's like, "Well, um, we're just spending all of our money on advertising, and so it was the market was rewarding that kind of activity, and then they said, look, we're going to take on a ton of money, and then because we want to be the biggest, the fastest, and we want to dominate the market. And then of course everything that's coming up right now, startups who need investment are struggling. So it's like an interesting turn, because in the beginning, when I was just starting my business, I didn't think that bootstrapping is sexy. I thought that, like, oh, like bootstrapping is kind of for losers who can't get funding. That's how it felt. Like I just kept getting rejected. And I'm like, well, I just might as well spend my energy building the actual business, because no one wants to
right,
invest in this. But now, like it's like, so that's why, like, we go through so many versions, right? What's good is bad, and then what's bad is good. And if you stick around long enough, like you'll see all different like variations. So I find it, interesting. Like the majority of our clients has always been small business owners, like that are bootstrapping. And so it's just like a different way of like operating. It's a different way of spending. It's a different way of delegating. It's a different way of looking at resources. Yeah, it's a very interesting
just
part.
to go back though to that Bezos piece, Bezos was not profitable. Amazon was not profitable because they were investing in building customers, but they were cash flow positive, which is a
Mm,
big difference, right? So the one of the biggest flaws with like the Blue Aprons of the world, for example, or any of those food companies is the amount you spend to get a customer. I think they were spending upwards of $500 to get a
mm,
customer who spends $100,
mm,
right? Is an upside down model. Now,
mm,
if that customer that you spent the $500 for, that's spending $100, comes back 6 or 7 times and spends it, well, that's okay. What Bezos was doing was saying, okay, it costs us, virtually nothing to get a customer to buy a book. That's too. I don't have enough time to explain that one to you, but on how that whole thing happened. But it costs us virtually nothing to get a customer to buy a book. They buy a book. Now we have to spend money to get them to continue to come back and over again. I think with Smile Club, they were spending too much money to get those customers, and the cost or the revenue generated from a customer over the lifetime wasn't
mm.
compensating it enough. So you're 100% right in the fact that, yes, like a Harry's or a Warby Parker, who's not profitable because they're continually investing in building. But when you look at the financials, right, those guys are cash flow positive, right? They're spending less to get a customer than that the customer is driving in, right?
Mhm.
Your
Yep.
business, you would do that. It costs you X to get a customer, and that customer you want to deliver 5X or 6X over what you spent, even if you weren't profitable, but you were cash flow positive, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah, makes sense.
there's a great book about that whole Bezos and Amazon thing in the early days, and
Oh,
how Amazon, because they were on the balls of their butt for a year or two, and there were two strategic moves that really saved that company. One
uh-huh.
was the deal with Toys R Us. The other one was the deal with Borders Books.
Oh,
Those two deals set them up for success. So
mhm.
anyway, but it is interesting. You're 100% right. It is interesting. So listen, we're getting close to being out of time. We sort of got rolling with this conversation, and I didn't do any of the stuff I'm supposed to be doing. But, so it's whatever happens happens. So, but just to leave people, because you obviously spend a lot of time thinking about consumer or behavior of CEOs and things like that, entrepreneurs. What's the if you had to leave people with one thing about what you think it takes to be a great entrepreneur, what would it be?
Well, I'll say it right in the, from the perspective of, my kind of my business experience, which is, even if you are a solopreneur, even if you are you're stepping into business without business partners, you don't have to go at it alone. You can get support, and that's so important. Just psychologically knowing that there are others that can help support you with accountability. There are others to whom you can speak to, where they it makes the business real. So if we're talking about people that are just getting started inside of their businesses, just that having that community around you, getting support, is so important. And then for the larger bit, for the businesses that have been around for a while, do you have that right hand support that you need to complement the skill sets that you have, because you're going to go much further. And then the next level of it is, if you're looking for growth, because delegation and working with the likes of executive assistants, what it's not just about delegation, it's also about leadership. It's about good leadership. And so if you as the leader are not delegating, guarantee that the rest of your team is not delegating, doesn't know how to delegate as well. And if you as the leader are delegating, that next step is to see where can you offer for your teams that opportunity to get support. Because just like you as the founder, as the owner, want to have leverage and work inside of your zone of genius, so should the people that you have inside of your business. And so, as we're entering 2024, right, like a big goal to consider, and you need to make time for it. Like if you're going to if delegation is like at the top of your goals and lists, and like that's what you want to see for yourself, then as you're planning 2024, I really encourage you to think, how can I build actual time in my week to plan my delegation so that I can get it back tenfold?
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I like that. That's a little bit different than we've heard. Usually everybody says, perseverance, or, you have to do this. But I like what you just said, though. That's great. Um, I really enjoyed the conversation. I really enjoyed having you on. It was really, obviously, it was good because I'm so late. It's not even funny. And I'm going to start getting yelled at soon. So I appreciate I appreciate having you on. How can people get in touch with you? How can they get to you on, I guess they can go to the website, chatterboss.com. And then how can people get to you? LinkedIn, or send you an email, buy the book on Amazon, all those things, right?
Yeah, do all the things. And to personally connect, I love LinkedIn. I'm always doing webinars and having conversations on there, so just love to connect there. And then of course, anything that you need, I really do encourage time to set up the strategy session, and that's on chatterboss.com.
Okay, great. So have a good night. It's a good talking to you, and I hope
It's a
you.
lot of
I
fun.
hope,
What happens when visionaries get together without an integrator to
Yeah.
Keep them on track. This is what happened.
Yeah. Well, I hope we keep in touch, and I enjoyed it, and I hope we can do it again at another time and expand on this. So,
Absolutely.
all right, thank you.
Thank
I have to do a couple of things to close up, and so I'll talk to you later. And good having you again.
thank you.
Thanks. So, folks, obviously very lively, very good discussion. I enjoyed it. I think you guys did too. Really good information. I thought it was really interesting, her perspective, Valerie's perspective on entrepreneurship and business and startups. So, um, again, go to so I'm so behind. I'm going to get yelled at. But go to this, scan this QR code. Go to my site. Get the free download for business planning. It's good. It's free. You'll enjoy it. It'll help you think through if you're thinking about a new business. It'll help you think through it. And yeah, let's keep in touch. Next week, we've got somebody on with regard to accounting and a business revolved around accounting. So, yeah, tune in next week. Hopefully, we're bringing you some really great content, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the conversation tonight. So, thank you, and we'll see you again. Next week. So.